This presentation was designed to give you a brief orientation to international students' transition into U.S. college classrooms. It is meant to provide a snapshot of some of the issues that might shape their experiences in your class and give you some tools to better understand their experiences and needs. Though research has shown that international students in U.S. higher education tend to face challenges in areas such as acculturation, English language proficiency, academic adjustment, and cross-cultural interactions, research has also demonstrated international students' ability to succeed academically in spite of some of these challenges as a result of their motivation, effort, and persistence. Before discussing academic acculturation further, it's important to clarify terminology. Most of the information in this resource targets international students who speak English as a second or additional language, sometimes referred to as second language or L2 students, multilingual students, or culturally and linguistically diverse students. Though it's common to refer to them as international students, it is important to note that this is not a monolithic group. International students at GW come from a variety of linguistic, cultural, and educational backgrounds, even if they hail from the same country. Keeping this diversity in mind helps us guard against making sweeping generalizations or assuming we know our students simply by knowing which country they come from or which language they speak. Nonetheless, this presentation attempts to provide some general points to consider regarding international students' experience in our classes. As the above adage reflects, it is not always easy to understand the context that we operate in naturally. Every day we swim in the culture we inhabit without recognizing that newcomers will not navigate this water with the same familiarity. This is a good way to think about orienting ourselves to the experience of culturally and linguistically diverse students in our classes. A key premise of this resource is that we engage in pedagogic reflection in order to understand our students' experiences and develop more inclusive pedagogy. Consider the three following questions. How would you describe the culture of a U.S. college classroom? In what ways do you think this might be different from the experience of international students in your classes at GW? What do you think would be the most challenging transitions for students who come from different cultural, linguistic, and educational contexts? As noted previously, GW international students are highly diverse, and we want to be careful not to make assumptions about their backgrounds or experiences. However, there are some general characteristic features that have been used to describe U.S. college classrooms, and these may be a source of challenge for students who have come from different cultures and educational backgrounds. For East Asian students in particular, their previous educational experiences may have involved exam-driven education systems in which writing papers is relatively rare, a system of knowledge transfer that consists of memorization and reproducing existing knowledge, in which criticality and individual voice may not be encouraged, and classroom contexts in which intellectual ownership and textual borrowing are unfamiliar concepts. According to Shapiro, Farrelly, and Tomas, in U.S. college classrooms, we have a tendency to value individualism, assertiveness and initiative, directness and efficiency, creativity and the expression of an original voice, egalitarianism, and a classroom culture that is characterized by heterogeneity, relative informality, and a focus on the learner rather than the teacher. Of course, not all classrooms in U.S. higher education embody these features. but they've been established as point of difference compared to the types of classroom contexts some international students come from. In the next few slides, I'm going to talk about a few general categories you might want to consider to better understand international students' academic transition. First, in terms of student expectations, international students might have a different interpretation of what is of academic value. They may be uncomfortable interacting with English-speaking American students. They may see the professor as an expert and not necessarily as a source of potential support. They may be under extreme grade pressure and feel a need to do well. They may have unrealistic expectations of the progress they may be able to make, or even the opposite, a lack of confidence in their own abilities. And they may have feelings of inadequacy or frustration in an American classroom context. Another acculturation challenge international students may face has to do with the format of the class or expectations for student participation. They may enter the classroom with the expectation that the professor knows all. The atmosphere in a U.S. college classroom may be more informal than what they're accustomed to. They might be fearful of using English or of sharing personal experiences or of coming across as critical in any comments that they might make. This may relate to peer or instructor interaction or possibly even to course topics. And they may have extreme anxiety about participating or speaking out loud in front of their classmates and professor. You may also find that international students lack shared knowledge when it comes to course content or academic conventions. For example, international students who come from different educational backgrounds may have limited cultural knowledge about course topics, therefore having limited access to ideas for discussion and analysis of course topics. They may have little or no experience with conventions of academic writing or speaking, or academic English conventions may run counter to their culture's rhetorical patterns and preferences. They may come from cultures in which there's a tradition of not challenging authority or even challenging their peers. And the writing conventions of their home culture or home educational environments might not necessarily meet American definitions of logic or use of evidence. A frequent point of concern American faculty have expressed about international students relates to academic integrity and plagiarism. So there are a couple of things to keep in mind here. International students may lack familiarity with the very concept of academic integrity and have limited experience with writing in text-responsive ways. In other words, writing using sources. Plagiarism in the literature has sometimes been called a survival strategy that international students might use just to get by in a highly pressurized environment. And sometimes international students from particular cultural backgrounds may have an obligation to help their peers in ways that violate standards of academic integrity in U.S. contexts. Although faculty often focus on the problem of language difference in U.S. college classrooms, being able to speak more than one language is in fact a huge asset that international students bring to our classroom communities. Nonetheless, students who have learned English as a foreign language in school or have had limited exposure to academic English in their previous schooling may face language issues that make their studies more challenging. For example, on a lexicogrammatical level, native English-speaking students entering college have been found to have an academic vocabulary of approximately 150,000 words. Second language speakers entering U.S. universities enter with a much smaller vocabulary base, which makes producing academic text even more challenging. Word choices and constructing academic sentences can be a real strain for international students, and producing any text can be very time-consuming. In terms of larger writing projects, many international students have had limited exposure to writing academic essays and papers in their native languages or in English. However, most students have mastered the TOEFL 5-paragraph essay structure, which is quite formulaic, and tend to reproduce that structure in essays and papers that they write in U.S. college classrooms. I hope this background on international student acculturation to U.S. higher education gives you a place to begin reorienting your pedagogical practices. As you move forward, keep these points in mind. Be empathetic. Imagine yourself in their position, considering cultural, linguistic, and practical challenges. When designing tasks and assignments, reflect on your own assumptions and expectations. Ask yourself, why do we do it this way? What are its component parts, and how can I scaffold them? Especially what might be new to students and second language speaking international students in particular. What are my expectations for success on this task? What do students need to be able to do to meet these expectations? What instructional practices can I modify to better support this endeavor? This may involve your design of assignment prompts, the written and oral guidance you provide on tasks and assignments, how you model your expectations for the production of certain tasks and assignments, how you deliver feedback, how you evaluate your students' work, and how you interact with them generally throughout the process of their learning. Thank you very much for your attention.